Good evening and welcome to the Break Show. Let me try that again. Good evening and welcome to the Breakfast Show After Dark. For those of you that don't know me, I am your host, Mark Anthony. I'll say a very quick hello to the people that have just leapt into the chat. Ken Hatter is in the house morning. Oh, good evening, Ken. I keep saying morning. Good evening, Mark. Good evening, gang. Thank you very much indeed for that, Gary. Peter Ferguson is here as well. Good evening to everyone. And Nigel Williams. I've just literally finished listening to one of Nigel's podcasts, and look what I've got. I have a Nigel Williams mug. My favourite podcast, and now my favourite mug. Fantastic stuff. Mick has just joined us as well. Evening, Mick. Good of you to be here as well. Now, over the next hour or so, we're going to be opening up our airwaves to you. If you have got a grievance or a concern you'd like to raise, then please post it in the chat and I'll do my best to get to it. Alternatively, if you look right at the very top of the chat, you will see a link that will allow you to be a guest on the show. All you need to do is click that link and fill in your details. It doesn't matter if you're on a computer. If you're on a computer, you need a webcam and a microphone that are functional, obviously, or if you're on a smart device, so quite possibly a smartphone, an iPhone or the Google alternative, or an iPad. Any of those things will do. Good evening to Gavin Elson as well. Gavin, one of my favourite trainers in the world. There you are. Mark Whiting, one of my favourite Instagram people in the world, and Jim Turner just I like Jim, what can I say? There is no script tonight, as you've probably gathered already, but we do have a handful of topics that I'm going to throw at the wall and see if any of them stick. But I've also got something, I'm going to pick up on one of these in particular. So if you would like to have a look at the subjects that are on offer for you tonight. Why do accident investigations take so long in the UK? Didcot is now at 7 years, Redcar 3 years and rising. Is woke culture influencing construction recruitment? And that's the one I really want to touch on tonight, if we possibly can. Do you feel safe attending construction equipment exhibitions? Obviously, we just heard that Bauma China has been kicked to the curb. That's gone back a year because of concerns about COVID over in China. And then the last one, should the HSC warn the industry about upcoming campaigns? But the one that I'd like to kick off with is the blue one, that one right there. That's where I'm going to be starting. But you can take a stab at any of those as you see fit. I'm going to throw something up on the screen just as a constant reminder. There you are. If you have a topic you'd like to discuss, just drop into the chat and we'll do our level best to get to it. And I will be throwing that back up again in a little bit. Don't forget, you can join us on the show if you so desire. You just go to the top of the chat, find the link, and you can join us right there. There you are. Just a very quick one on accidents. They need to be investigated immediately. No good days or possibly even years after. So while you're making up your minds on what bits you'd like to target tonight, let me give you a bit of background. Excuse me, clearing my throat because I'm going to start to deliver now. There have been suggestions that woke culture has infiltrated the construction industry's recruitment process. That people are being employed to tick ethnic, gender, or sexual orientation boxes rather than because they're the best candidate. That being a straight white male is actually seen as a disadvantage by some employers and recruiters. Now, this topic was prompted by two messages from friends and audience members. Before we look at the individual stories, let me state for the record that I'm a vocal advocate for women in construction. I'm also a firm believer that people should be employed based on their skills, experience, and suitability for the job in question, not on their gender, sexual preference, or skin colour. Just want to make that absolutely clear. Now, let me have a look. Right, okay, so now I've got all that clear. I'm sorry I was distracted there. I've just had a message coming in via WhatsApp. Took me by surprise. Now that's clear. Here is the first of the two stories in what I shall call a tale of two pities. I hope you see what I did there. The first message reads, a very good friend of mine applied for a trainee position with a company that shall remain nameless. He's in his late 30s from a farming background and Romanian, but he's been in the UK for 16 to 17 years, speaks better English than most English people, and has one of the best work ethics I know. Yet it's taken the unnamed company over 9 months to reply to him for the training program. I know he was one of the first to submit his CV because I'd heard about the position before it was advertised. The company has taken on many females for the same position that he applied for, so could this be a case of them trying to be woke to tick some boxes for HS2. Is he too old for the training program at 30 years old? Is it a case of if you're a straight white male, you are put to the bottom of the list nowadays? Okay, before we attempt to address and unpick that one, let me balance things out just a slightly with a second story from another one of our viewers. Their message reads, I'm really not surprised so many youngsters do nothing with their lives. I'm angry, upset, and downright furious at the same time. I have a lad who lives opposite me called Mason. I've helped Mason write a CV and to apply for apprenticeships. He's gone from 300 applicants down to the final 2 with a huge plant dealership, and ultimately he missed out. Pretty hard luck. They then offered him a job in the yard cleaning plant with a view to fast-track an apprenticeship next year because he impressed them so much. They haven't contacted him in 8 weeks. He's emailing them and calling them with no response. Now, not that this should be in any way important whatsoever, it's probably worth noting that Mason, the protagonist of our second story, is of mixed race. Now, the 2 tales I've just shared are completely unconnected, and I don't believe that one balances out the other. That just because a mixed race lad is struggling to get a start in the business automatically disproves any suggestion of woke culture. And I also don't believe that the 2 individuals and specific stories constitute a trend or a pattern of any kind. But we are constantly being told that the industry is suffering from a skill shortage, that we need to find another 50,000 people each year for the next decade to meet workload demands, that we need to encourage young people into the sector. And yet here we have 2 young people, one a bit younger than the other, and both are being given the runaround by an industry that claims to be desperate for workers. So what's going on? Are you better off being female and ideally from an ethnic minority background? Were these 2 individuals just anomalies? And just how desperate is the industry for workers when it can keep 2 willing workers waiting in the wings? Over to you, people. I said that the subjects are open. Gary Muirhead has just said, I've got a question that came up on site today about forward tipping dumpers with cabs. Should the driver be allowed to sit in the cab when it's being loaded, or do they still have to stand outside? If anybody has an answer to that, I was rather hoping that Mick Norton would be in the house, because Mick is the expert on all these things. But I would love to get your thoughts on that. We have operators in there. My understanding was they are now with a cab. Bearing in mind that the cabs now are impact resistant, I'm not entirely sure where we stand on that legally. Love to get the thoughts on that. An employee should be judged on ability and attitude. I totally agree. And again, I've just been talking off air about a company and another company that shall remain nameless. And I'm not doing that because I'm afraid of being sued. I am afraid of being sued, but that's not the reason I'm doing it. The reason I'm not naming companies is because I've only been presented with one side of the argument. So there is a possibility that the company that was named, the plant company that was keeping Mason waiting, might have a perfectly legitimate reason for doing so, and the company that was the earth moving company, muck shifting company that was keeping our Romanian friend waiting in the wings, they may have a perfectly good reason too. That's why I'm not naming them. But it does make you wonder, doesn't it? We are. I mean, I'm constantly bombarded about the message about skill shortages and the need to train, and so on. It kind of makes you wonder if there is something going on with the training companies that are pushing this skill shortage agenda to fill their books with trainees that then ultimately don't actually get a foot on the ladder because nobody can be bothered to respond to them. And bearing in mind, going back to the first one with the tale of our Romanian friend, bearing in mind the suggestion there was that it was HS2. Somebody was trying to tick woke boxes for HS2. HS2 has got a huge draw on employees within the industry and will continue to do so for the next couple of decades or thereabouts. Can we really afford to be putting people waiting in the wings, or should we not be pushing them through? So Ken Hatcher has been back on the cabbed dumper thing. Safer in the cab, I think, although if you're loading a 6-ton dumper with a 30-ton machine, question mark, good question. The cab has to meet falling object protection structure. Gavin Nelson, by the way, is a trainer of some repute. He knows, what's the expression? He knows his shit. Yeah, that's the one. If it does, the operator can sit in the cab. If not, they have to remove themselves from the dumper. So I think it's a case of making sure you know what your machine is built for and what it's capable of, and assuming it has met falling object protection structure regs, FOPS regs, to those that know, then you are allowed to be in the cab. As you say, there is some protection there, isn't there? A great deal of protection. I'm going to throw these back up on the screen just as a reminder of the bits that we had in mind. Let me just change the view slightly because nobody wants to look at my massive head. Why do accident investigations take so long in the UK? There we are. Is woke culture influencing construction recruitment? And more than that, is it influencing any other aspect of the industry? I mentioned earlier I'd watched a video from a crane hirer, a crawler crane hirer, and the employee that was, or the operator that was driving the crawler crane was a young woman, and the person within the company that was talking about the acquisition of this fabulous new Liebherr crane was also a woman, somebody that I happen to know. And it did strike me, and I promise you, I'm not complaining about this because, frankly, the more women around the industry, the better, as far as I'm concerned. But it did strike me. It almost felt like we'd gone completely the other way, like we'd decided, actually, men, no, we don't need them. We'll only have women. I'm sure that was just the way that the video came across, and maybe I was looking too closely into it. But if anybody's got any more on that, love to know about it. I think that's a yes and no answer. Do you feel safe attending construction exhibitions? Personally, do I feel entirely safe? No. Will I still do it? Yes. Should the HSE warn the industry about upcoming campaigns? We mentioned this on the show this morning about the fact that the HSE is about to have a big drive on the handling of construction materials. Should the industry be given a heads up, or should they be expected to be doing the job properly in the first place? And if the HSE turn up with their clipboards and their hard hats and their shiny new boots, and they stroll onto the site and see something that's out of order, they can pull them straight away. Should we be forewarned? And does that not take the focus away? It's a thing that I've mentioned in the past about the way that I'm treated on site. Bearing in mind, A, I'm a journalist, and B, I arrive with multiple cameras. And it's a bit like the Queen, God rest her, or the King, as he is now, being convinced that everywhere smells of fresh paint. My job is a bit like that. Virtually every site I go to is pristine and running like clockwork. Do I believe that's always the case? No. And the HSE would be the same. You know, if you think that the HSE are in your area and they are focusing on slips and trips, dust and vibration, whatever it might be, whatever their focus is, chances are you're going to roll out the red carpet, aren't you? Bit of a feedback here. Tristan Mays is here. Good morning. Oh, good morning. Good afternoon. Oh, good evening. Christ almighty. Days gone by so fast. So, Ken Hatcher, Red Row allow it. I think we're talking about operators in the cabs of dumpers, cabbed dumpers, while they're being loaded. Red Row allow it. Taylor Whippy don't. So, that's good. That's nice and consistent for the industry, isn't it? Peter Ferguson, perhaps human resources departments are short-staffed or are still working from home and not as productive as an office-based worker. There is a possibility, but what I find remarkable about this is, particularly with somebody like, I'll be absolutely honest, I'll say it about both of them. Our Romanian friend, who I don't know the name of, and our friend Mason there. Both of them are willing. Both of them come with the backing of somebody that's been there, done that, and got the T-shirt, and yet they're being kept waiting. To what end? Now, if either of them had letters back saying, no, we actually thought you were a psychopath and therefore you're not suitable for our work, I can understand that. But bearing in mind, particularly with Mason, he got down to the last 2 out of 300 candidates, and they've subsequently offered him a job with a fast track through to an apprenticeship, and then they leave him hanging for 8 weeks. I understand his circumstances are he needs to be working. He's only 16, but he needs to be working. I'm sure there's probably some family circumstances there that go with it. So what's he going to do? If he needs to work, he's probably only going to go somewhere else. And there we are. We've lost somebody willing that's got the backing of somebody that knows their stuff. Crazy. Let's have a look. Ken Hatter is saying HSE should be surprise visits. I totally agree. To be perfectly honest, to the point where I would probably not a popular opinion in the industry, I would rather see more prosecutions because the HSE was actually discovering things that were wrong, rather than arriving at NFDC or CPA meetings and for the next 6 months we're going to be focused on working at height or slips and trips or whatever it might be, and then having a campaign on that. Arrive unannounced, find out what's going wrong, and if people are doing things wrong, make them pay. Totally understand that cost should never come into it, but you've got to wonder how much did cost so far. 1, 2, 3 million? Yeah, 100%. And it is, bearing in mind, primacy still belongs with Thames Valley Police, but the HSE are involved. Both of those are effectively government funded, public funded. So the public has been paying for the past 7 years to go nowhere. Didcot has not moved 1 iota as far as anyone is aware. I've already said good evening to Tristan Mays. Dan Cullen has said, good evening all, had to change viewing to my laptop. So I'm coming in widescreen, in full panoramic. Lucky old you. Mick Wright, accident investigations take so long here for one reason. The HSE work on an archaic and totally out-of-date system. A silly, toughy-nosed old git sits at the top and looks at what may or may not have been looked at. But given the stupid ideas of the civil service idiots, shall I go on? Feel free. That's why we have these shows. You can feel free to go on all night if you wish, and I will keep throwing them up there. But I think you're right. I've said this before, and I will say it again. Who polices the police? Who watches the Watchmen, for those that like their movies or their comic books? Where do you turn, given the fact that the HSE and Thames Valley Police have now dragged their feet for 7 years? To whom do you turn? There could be a call for a public inquiry. I know that's something we've discussed before, but the people that you have to apply to for the public inquiry, lo and behold, are the same people that have been dragging their heels for the last 7 years. Like asking turkeys to vote for Christmas, isn't it? Dan Cullen, few developers will only allow cab dumpers on sites now. It had to happen, didn't it? There's been far too many people clipped. And when I say clipped, I mean clobbered by buckets swinging past them while they're sat on an old-style cab. It is a fact that companies may have people with racist views and unofficially won't employ foreign or non-white people. Obviously not fair or right, but definitely a fact. We as a species are cautious of what isn't commonplace, whether it's a type of person or place. Not my view, just an observation. I mean, it makes me despair when you read things like that, even though I know it to be the case. And unfortunately, I think where you're mentioning their racist views, I think that would extend to anti-feminist views. I think it would extend to anti or homophobic views as well. If you've got a well-oiled gang of guys who have made it very clear by their actions or their words that they are not big on gay people, on women, or anybody that isn't white. Are you going to try and stir the pot? Probably not. And it just all the time that's going on, unfortunately, and this is kind of counter. And I'm going to come on to Nigel Williams in a minute, who's going to give much the same sort of view there. I keep coming back to this. In the UK, 51% of the population is female. If we were to be more welcoming to women in the right place, and I'm not saying they should just be given a job because they happen to have ovaries. I'm not saying that for one moment. But there is enough women out there willing to work that could cure our skill shortage overnight. That's assuming that the people that are employing them, our major plant dealer and the muck shifting company, that's assuming they will ever actually get back to them. Now, Nigel Williams, a provider of podcasts and mugs to the masses. I have no problem with diversity in the workplace, and I'm infuriated by the woke wankers who think that women need 50% representation in the industry. But note this, they're not demanding it across all positions, but merely positions of power and influence. They're not whining about bricklayers being 99% male populated, no whining about sewage tanker operators being 99.9% male populated. But if there wasn't a 50-50 representation in the C-suite and board of directors, there would be a Twitter camp, and I'm going to guess that that's campaign because it runs out there. Nigel then goes on the other subject, ROPS and FOPS. Drivers stay seated in the safety of cabin. Any management disagree should be dismissed and barred from the industry for being morons. If we disbarred everybody that we consider to be a moron from this industry, frankly, our skill shortage would get a whole lot worse. Our friend Mick has just said, sorry, mate, I'm so pissed off the Didcot turnout. There is something not right in this cabbage patch with this. I totally agree. Al Grierson has just turned up all the way from Luxembourg, probably just back from getting his takeaway. I hope you got me something nice, Al. It may be cold by the time you got there, but it's just by the time it gets here, but it's the thought that counts. Unfortunately, I agree with HSE. We all need to go home safe at any cost. And I do think sites are a lot safer now, 30 years on, but they've got more to learn. I totally agree. We have come a long way. When I wrote the original and the best version of the history of the NFDC, I was presented with a box, several boxes actually, of leather-bound minutes from meetings going back as far as 1941 when the NFDC started, and deaths on site were commonplace. I mean, literally commonplace. You look at it now, and we are down to sometimes 30 or 40 a year. That's still 30 or 40 too many, but we have come a long way. But I would have thought that, there are several things there, and there's a couple of references to the HSE. First and foremost, rather than attending meetings and giving the wider industry forewarning of about what campaign is going to come up next, maybe their time would be better spent actually identifying the wrongdoing that takes place on sites up and down the land every single day. Maybe that would be better. Or maybe, rather than attending those meetings, they should be getting their nose their arse in the air, their nose to the grindstone, and actually come up with some sort of resolution on Didcot, on Redcar, and anything else. Do we have to make our industry more sexy to attract more people? Partly. I think one of the issues that we have, and for all of those that watch the show or watch the Breakfast Show on a regular basis, I'm sorry, I'm about to go back over old ground. You will be aware, I'm sure, of the adverts that are on the UK TV, and I'm sure they're the same the world over, for opportunities to join the armed forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, whatever it might be. And you will notice that at no point do any of those adverts ever mention you'll get to have a gun and shoot Johnny Foreigner. Because, well, A, not a great selling point, but also, when you look at the armed forces, and I think we may have one or two ex-armed forces in the audience there, it's not all about shooting Johnny Foreigner with a big gun. There are opportunities to become engineers, to learn how to fix a helicopter or a big gun or whatever it might be. Construction and demolition are exactly the same. demolition is supposedly supposedly employs somewhere between 25 and 30,000 people here in the UK. Of those, I would take a wild stab to say, if there's 30,000, I reckon there's 10,000 that really, if ever, wear a hard hat or safety boots, because there's a whole lot of demolition that takes place literally behind closed doors, away from site. So the administration, the legal side of things, the planning side of things, the human resources that goes into it, the management that goes into it, the preparing risk assessments and method statements, 3D drawings and 3D animations of how a job is going to be completed. There's a whole host of jobs that take place without ever getting your hands dirty, without ever putting a pair of safety boots on, and without ever having to wear a hard hat or a high-vis jacket. We don't talk about that enough. I often think we've pinned our hopes as an industry on things like simulators. So we turn up to the NEC once a year for a skill show, and we drag out the simulator and show young people, oh, look, isn't this simulator just like driving a great big Xbox? Now, would you like a job? That's not all that demolition is. It really isn't. So sexy, yes, I think that would help. And I certainly think, regardless of my earlier comments about the number of women in certain videos and that kind of thing, I think, what is the expression that you hear on the TV? You can't be what you can't see. So I think the more women we have, I think it will gradually lead to more women, because they will have role models to follow, and somebody will have pioneered a path into the industry, and other women will be able to follow that. Ultimately, I think other people from ethnic minorities will be able to follow that. Others that are transgender or whatever it might be, they will be able to follow a path because somebody has been there before them. But we need to allow that path to be created in the first place, and I think that's where we're going wrong at the moment. Our Grissom has just said the need 300k more workers thing is usually a strategy to depress wages. Yeah, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? There we are. Personally, I would stir the pot against the bigots on the persecuted person's behalf. Can't stand bullies. No, me either. And I'm bearing in mind, all of us do a job of work. I quite enjoy mine. Mainly because I just sit there and talk to myself. But I quite enjoy mine. But I do it for a long while. I do it for 10, 11, sometimes 12 hours a day. Imagine doing something for 11 or 12 hours a day, surrounded by people that make it very clear that they don't want you there. You know, you turn up for work in the morning, and rather than turning up, having your first cup of tea and then getting cracking and thinking, well, you know, the sun's shining or it's pissing with rain, but either way, I'm going to have a good day. Instead of that, you arrive to find out that you're being persecuted or abused in some way. And you know, as I say, I mean, I've had lots of cases, and unfortunately, the situation with women in construction, I've had lots of messages from women that watch this show and watch our morning show, who have experienced misogyny and anti-female rhetoric and that kind of thing. And some of them, you know, they turn up for work and they've got how do we describe them? Adult toys. They've got dildos stuck to the window of their female toilet or in the cab of their machine. So you literally arrive ready for work, ready to go and move some mark or whatever it might be, and your fellow workers have already made it very clear what they think of you. Imagine doing that 5-6 days a week, 12 hours a day. You'd get pretty pissed off with that, wouldn't you? Let's have a look. Gary Muirhead, I'm trying, mate, but Dayglow Orange Baby Grow turns most birds off. I can only imagine. Like you say, who's going to hold the HSE accountable? Seems like they are untouchable. Yeah, it really does feel like that. And again, you know, they don't have an easy job. I'm trying to play devil's advocate here. They don't have an easy job. And I would like to think that when we do finally get across the finish line with Didcot and with Redcar and with Longannet and all the other accidents and fatal accidents that they investigate, I would like to think that they have been properly thorough. But you may recall earlier this week we were talking about the fact that Didcot is nearly 7 years, Redcar is 3 years, and yet there was a building collapse in I think it was it Detroit? Or no, it was Boston in the US. And the whole thing, the guy was killed, building collapsed, and he and his digger fell 8 stories. He was killed. 6 months to investigate and prosecute. And one of the things that came out, I had a message from a viewer in the States who said that basically it was a citation. So in other words, they'd investigated it, found the cause, and gone public with the cause. That's what we want for Didcot. All the machinations that go after that, I wouldn't say they're neither here nor there, but if we could go back to the relevant families of the 4 guys that were killed and say, here's what happened on that fateful day, at least you've got some closure now. And to go back to the industry and say, here's what happened on that fateful day, now you know what to avoid should you find yourself taking down a boiler house of a similar design. At least you know. All of the prosecutions and the arguments in court, all of that can wait. But I do think we do need a shift in the system that brings that to light a lot sooner. Let's have a look. Dan Cullen, in my opinion, that's why we're here. It's all about your opinion. Not yours specifically, Dan, just people in general. In my opinion, there's not enough equality on sites from operators, site managers to ground workers. I've yet to be on a job with a female or another ethnicity manager or supervisor. Most what I see is local or Romanian, which is why... Not sure where that was going. It is. That is the case. I've said this before, and I promise you, I'm not saying this as a dig at the NFDC. I've just been to a lot of their dues over the years. There was a time, it's changed a little bit recently, but there was a time if you went to an NFDC event, an AGM or a regional meeting, if you saw a woman or a non-white person, chances are they'd be carrying a drinks tray. Really. Seriously. Dan Cullen, can we not attract others? What's the issue? As you said, we need to make it attractive to all. We do. And to, again, I think reinforce, particularly when it comes to, for example, let's talk about employing more women in the industry. They don't necessarily need to drive an excavator or a dump truck or a crane or a dozer. There are plenty jobs out there in which they won't need that. Office-based, and I'm not suggesting for one moment, before the bloody hate police get on my case, I'm not suggesting that women are more suited to clerical roles. I'm just saying, if you are a young woman, or not even a young woman, if you are a woman and you fancy a job in construction, but you don't really like the idea of being on a muddy site with questionable toilet facilities, doesn't prevent you from joining the industry. There are plenty of other opportunities there that don't include any of that. We don't talk about that enough. Bearing in mind, the UK construction industry as a whole employs just over 3 million people, apparently. How many of those are on site? Even if it was 3/4, there's a good 500,000 jobs out there that need doing for people that don't want to get their hands dirty. Plenty of opportunity out there. In my own living memory, I've seen signs in shops: no dogs, no Packies, no blacks, no Irish. We've come a long way from those days. Yeah, absolutely. If anybody, I am a man of a certain age. That is part of the biography or autobiography of John Lydon, better known to most of us, I think, as Johnny Rotten. He is of Irish descent, and his early days in London, no Irish, or no dogs and no Irish. It's a real thing. It's not something that was cooked up by TV dramas. It's a real thing. We should all be a Lighthouse Club ambassador on site every day and start the day with how are we and ask again, are we really okay? I mentioned this to Bill Hill, the CEO of the Lighthouse Club, when I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago. I was on the receiving end of this. Are you okay? No, are you really okay? The guy that did it to me, funnily enough, I wouldn't say we always necessarily see eye to eye, and I would say he was more an acquaintance than a friend. But he was aware of a few bits and pieces that I've been through, and most specifically, he was aware. I kind of live my life in public, so he was aware that my best friend had been killed in a motorcycle accident, and we were at the same event together. And he came up, shook my hand, and said, "How are you doing?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And he hung on. And he actually hung on quite tight and sort of pulled me a bit closer. And he went, "No, really, how are you doing?" And that was all the permission I needed to say, "No, actually, I'm shit. I feel bloody awful, actually. I just lost my best mate." And as it turned out, I think part of the reason that he was so switched on to that was that he was working for a company where there'd been a fatality. In actual fact, it wasn't a fatality, it was a suicide, which has sort of turned him onto the whole mental health thing. And he really did. He gave me permission to open up about the fact that I wasn't feeling particularly good. And I think we do need to do that more. And perhaps even more specifically, how much would it hurt if you were working on a site where there's a woman? How much would it hurt to ask how they're doing? And I don't mean in a flirty, bloody male way. I just, how you doing? You all right? You anything bothering you? Think about that as well. Think about if you're a woman on site. I've never been one, but I'm going to take a wild stab. I know when I go out in a male group or a largely male group, you find yourself talking about things like the football or the rugby or the cricket or whatever it might be. Which is fine. If you're with a bunch of blokes and they're all like-minded and they like their football, their rugby, or whatever it might be, then you crack on. But you imagine if you are a woman working on site and you have to listen to just that all day, every day. Yes, hate police before you crack on. I know that some women like football, and I know some women like rugby. I'm aware. I know what the score is. But imagine that, it's break time and you all make your way off to a portly cabin and everything else. And the topic of conversation is 12 people and 11 of them are talking about football and the offside rule. And you, the lone female on that site, is sat in a corner thinking, probably made a bad career choice here. How hard would it be to reach out and say to that woman or that young woman, that girl, "You're right. How about you? What do you want to talk about?" And let's not, just to remind you that we are adults here. That doesn't mean that we have to all start to talk about Coronation Street and EastEnders. There's more to women than that. Honestly, there is. In my house, murder mysteries. Bane of my bloody life. What? That's why I'm sat here at 7:30 at night, because my wife will be watching a murder mystery, almost without question. Dan Cullen. Yes, I'm Irish. Dan, I would never have guessed. But most jobs I've been on, Irish supervisors were the worst for abusing guys on site, and I had head-to-head with a few. Why no, not sure where that was going. One of the things that Bill Hill said, in actual fact, I think I may have used it as the intro to the edited video that we put out, and you can find that over on YouTube. Just go and search for Demolition News on YouTube. You'll find it's one of the most recent videos. He said that we are quite a shouty industry. We are. We absolutely are. Should we be? Is that really the best way to get your message across? Do you have to be shouty and sweary? I will say it very, very quickly because I know I've mentioned it before. In the formative years of my journalistic career, I was very fortunate to work within the space of about 6 months. I worked with one editor who was basically Gordon Ramsay. Funnily enough, he was Scottish, shouty, sweary. Anything that wasn't nailed down in his office was a weapon. He would throw things at people, at walls. a bit of a tosser, frankly. And then within 6 months, I was working for another editor who open door policy. You could go to him with anything. Once a month, he'd pop over the pub, buy you lunch, tell you how well you were doing, and you'd have walked over hot coals for him. We now live in 2022. Do we really need to be shouting and effing and jeffing on site to get the best out of our workers? Particularly when we are all supposedly aware of mental health issues. That's one of the things that I find remarkable, is the fact that on one hand we have social media campaigns from major contractors and plant hirers. We've put in place mental health first aiders, and we have mental health awareness sessions, and we have mental health awareness professionals on standby. And yet when you get down to site level, it's everybody, every man for himself or every woman for themselves. Everybody's under pressure. Everybody's being shouted at. You do one thing wrong and everybody wants you off the site, and you are called every name under the sun. How do those two things tally? In my opinion, they don't. Jim Turner, thank you very much indeed for this, Jim. If everyone keeps quiet, the morons will keep making someone's life a misery. The idiots tend to be quieter when someone else starts ripping into them instead. Yeah, unfortunately. Al Grierson is back. Reed Didcott is becoming increasingly clear in the UK that working class people don't matter to the people in charge. The government only faced pushback once they targeted the middle class homeowners with interest rate hikes. 300,000 excess deaths to austerity are simply ignored, and I will never forget, and nor should anybody else. And yes, I'll cut off the hate police before we get there. I will say right now, first and foremost, Boris Johnson was a buffoon. He was a god-awful prime minister and so on. But the worst thing that he did wasn't having a party the day after the Duke of Edinburgh died. It was apparently saying, let the bodies pile up in the middle of COVID. That's how much our glorious government think of working men and women. Good to see we have a woman in our midst, Tina Walls. I've gone to loads of NFTC meetings and AGMs. Good for you, Tina. Good for you. And as Dan Callan has just said, welcome, Tina Ward. When I was talking about the NFTC, I did preface it by saying things have changed, but I'm bearing in mind I've been going to those events for quite some time, and trust me, and we're not talking a huge amount of time ago. We're probably talking 10 years ago. And funnily enough, and this is a slightly different thing. Obviously, Tina is female, but I'm gonna throw this one out there. I made a point on a show a while back, and it's happened twice. I made the point about the fact that the demolition industry didn't have enough women, and I was taken to task by our friend Terry Cornby, Dr. Terry Cornby, who pointed out 3 women that were members of the IDE. 3 out of about 700. Okay, take that on the chin, and I've got a lot of respect for Terry, and his heart's in the right place, so I took that on board. But then a few months later, I decided, actually, we're going to revisit this, and I talked about the fact that, isn't it weird that we have no professional football players who are gay, or openly gay, or allowed to be openly gay? And isn't it equally strange that we have no openly gay people working in the demolition industry? And I was contacted by a company up in the northwest of England, and I'm struggling to remember the name of the company, who said, actually, you're completely wrong. We have an openly gay member of staff here. That's one out of 30,000. What does that tell you? Let's have a look at Nigel Williams. One problem I'm seeing come up with some women in construction, not all, is that they think they are something special and should be fast-tracked in every way, shape and form to suit their own agenda, not necessarily company needs. You are seeing that firsthand. I can only watch from afar. But one of the things that I am very aware of is there is an additional burden placed upon some females within the industry. And I'm thinking of a few in particular. I won't name them because I've got a lot of time for them, and I like both of them. But they've been taken on to do a job, whatever that job might be within the industry. But they have then been held up as some kind of role model or a figurehead of some wider campaign. So rather than just turning up and driving a digger, now they're driving a digger and flying a bright pink flag above the cab of their machine, figuratively, not literally, flying a big flag above their digger, saying, "Look at me, I'm a woman. Follow me. Follow the rose-petaled path upon which I have forged." That's not fair either, and it's not real. You know, it's that there are quite a few social media influencers who are of the female persuasion. Good luck to them. Good luck to them. And I hope they earn a bloody fortune. I hope that people from workwear companies and everywhere else, I hope they throw money at them like it's going out of fashion. But that is not what the industry is really like. And I'm not for one moment suggesting that Instagram is real life, because trust me, it sure as hell isn't. Bearing in mind, I am on Instagram daily. 140,000, 141,000 followers. My son's got, well, he's closing in on 400,000 now, I think. We know our way around Instagram, and I know it's not real. And presenting it as such is not real. You know, when you see the way that it's portrayed by some of these, and it's not their fault. Let me make that clear. It's not the fault of the female social media influencers, but you know, here's a lovely pink high-vis jacket. Go and model it. Go and show it in this pristine condition, and on this beautiful sunlit construction site where the machine in the background is pristine and everyone is being nice to you. Really, you think that's real, do you? Yeah. Tristan Mays, I'm pretty sure there's lots of women in the construction industry working behind the scenes, lots of depot managers in the crane industry that are women. Good, yeah. But those are the jobs, depot managers. I mean, some of the, back when I was on Plant Managers Journal, and I'm going back, Christ, best part of 30 years, some of the best hire managers in the business were women. I mean, you look at True 7 Group today. Obviously, it's run by Guy Nichols today, but True 7 back in the day was Falk Rent, and Falk Rent was run by Guy's sister, Trudy. And she was as tough as old boots and a proper formidable woman in a what was even more so back then, a male world. There are opportunities aplenty out there. Don't necessarily have to be at site level. I've worked at the site as a site manager. We had Holly from Keltbray in charge of the London and Southern region. There are women in the industry, but a lot of women don't want to get dirty. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And let's not forget, I mean, Holly from Keltbray, Holly Price, was the NFDC president for a period of 2 years. And boy, oh boy, did she ever choose the short straw or get handed the short straw through no fault of the NFDC whatsoever. She managed to inherit the job of NFDC president pretty much as COVID hit. And, you know, a key part of one of the key parts of the job of the NFDC president is to host events where people get together and share ideas and network and that kind of thing. And basically, almost for the entire duration of Holly's presidency, that was off the cards. Life treated her pretty badly on that. That's the draw you get. And unfortunately, we've got exactly the same thing again at the moment with William Crooks, whose presidency has been largely tainted by the ongoing CMA investigation. Nothing to do with him whatsoever, but it's landed in his lap. Unfortunate. I found most men on site have been really respectful and caring towards me. That's good to hear, Tina. To counter that, and I'm not here to argue, but I will say this. Good friend of ours here at the show, Elle Paget down at Kent Demolition. she has the unfortunate problem of being A, female, B, blonde, and C, tall and attractive. And I've been on site with her in the past where delivery drivers or low loader drivers have arrived and they have walked into the site cabin, seen the attractive blonde female and seen the Herbert in the high-vis, and have targeted all their questions to the Herbert in the high-vis, not knowing that the attractive blonde was the boss. Knew their job better than they did. Tina Ward, I hate soap operas. You and me both. Let's hope the days of wolf whistling and get your tits out are now behind us. I wish that were the case, but I don't think it is. As I say, there are plenty of people out there, plenty of females out there, and as I say, I've always been asked to provide some anonymity for the ladies in question. But literally up until earlier this year, still getting messages from ladies that have arrived, gone to use the female-only site toilet, and there are vibrators in there to welcome them. They have had vibrators stuck or dildos stuck to the front cab or front glass of their machine, and you have to put up with that. Apparently, I don't know why. Let's have a look. Michael Wright or Mick Wright should have added each year on that drug question. Yeah, we mentioned drugs earlier about the HSE should be focusing a little bit more on drugs because apparently they are becoming increasingly widespread. And I think with the rise of everything, which will almost certainly include things like alcohol, I would imagine we will see more people turning to drugs, which in some cases are cheaper, more affordable. And we've also got the issue of leading on from the current ongoing economic crisis. Unfortunately, some people do need a crutch to lean upon during the hard times. And if those hard times do require you to reach out for a crutch, some people might reach out for a pint or two. Some people might reach out for something a little less legal. Drug testing, I think, is going to be a real key thing. I don't think Duncan Riddell has ever been on the show before, so good evening, Duncan. That's because you've proven industry knowledge and somewhat greater than most. I think that was referring to Tina Ward. I'm going to take a wild stab at that. But just to remind everybody, when you arrive here on the first time, you do get some welcome confetti. I need to do this. That one is for Duncan Riddell, and we'll do another one for Tina Ward because I don't think I've seen either of them in the chat before. So thank you very much indeed for being here, guys. Much appreciated. Really appreciate your input. Let's have a look. Dan Cullen. Some women operatives have more knowledge of some aspects of their job at hand. I know few top-class plant operators and brickies, and few men berated them, and now they're better than ever. Yeah, I mentioned this on the show the other day, and I realise I'm stealing a cliche, but there is that old adage about Ginger Rogers. If you're less than 50 years old, go and ask your dad. Ginger Rogers, famous old movie star with her dance partner, Fred Astaire, and the old adage was that Ginger Rogers did everything that Fred Astaire did, only she did it backwards and in high heels. And I think that is still the case for some women in the industry. I think they are having to work harder to overcome prejudice and to prove their worth, when I believe that some men wouldn't have to do that. The very fact that they turn up with a bit of plastic that says they're competent would be enough. Whereas women, I think, have to compete that much harder. Amy Underwood, the Digger Girl, should be a real inspiration to women for our industry. Totally agree. She's doing a fantastic job, particularly over on Instagram. I keep an eye on a fairly regular basis. Got to meet her very briefly at Hillhead a little while ago. Mick Norton has just turned up. Mick, just to bring you up to speed, and I'm going to throw these up very quickly. These are the topics of conversations that are up for grabs. Why do accident investigations take so long? Is woke culture influencing construction recruitment? Do you feel safe attending construction exhibitions? Or should the HSE warn about upcoming campaigns? Just to bring you up to speed, because I know of all of our guests or our viewers, I know our friend Mick likes to get his teeth into some of this. Same as Jim Turner says, same as most things in life, we need to normalise women on site, not necessarily set them on a pedestal. As long as they've got adequate toilet and changing facilities, they're just another worker that needs to be treated with respect like every other worker. Not much to ask, is it? Treated with respect. And to be absolutely honest, I've never once met a woman in demolition or in construction that has requested any kind of pedestal. They just want to be kind of left alone and allowed to do what they do, as you would expect. I did an interview, and funny enough, it was Elle Paget down at Kent Demolition. I did an interview with her back in the days of Demolition magazine, before I switched from magazines to doing this, and I told her story. The photographs in the magazine gave the game away, but I had spent 25 years by that point talking about, she's a woman in a man's world, and it's a male-dominated industry, but she's risen to the top, which is a bunch of horseshit. So when I interviewed Elle, I did the whole story, and literally the last line was, by the way, she's a woman, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. She was bearing in mind her dad does the job. Her dad owns the company. Her dad has done the job. She has grown up doing demolition. She knows it inside out, back to front, has got the t-shirt, and not just that, the t-shirt looks better on her than it would on me. She's got the, I almost said she's got the balls, which is completely out of place, but she has got the cred to do the job. Sure, I'm going to say exactly the same about Tina Ward. I'm sure that's exactly the case there. Nobody is expecting a pedestal. Nobody is expecting special treatment. Nobody's expecting somebody to arrive and hand out perfume because there's a woman on site. Nobody's expecting that. Just let people be. Listen, if I can put up with working with Arsenal supporters and Spurs supporters over the years, both of which I have tolerated, then you can put up with working alongside women. It was agony, really. I have hundreds of agency advertisers and men talking they know what they're talking about, but they get more hassle than male counterparts from guys looking for jobs, which infuriates me. And when they get when they message me, I'll tell those guys to stop or be removed from groups. I think that's one of the. I just want to address this one very quickly. Are 2 day out of day eggs okay to use? We're generally here to help. Ken, what's the worst that could happen? What is the worst that could happen? I think if we are to make the next step in terms of equality and diversity within the industry, I do think that people do need to start speaking up. To take a step back, and if there is, we're going to come back to wolf whistling in a minute because apparently that's still a thing. If there is a woman or several women on site and you see them getting a hard time, isn't it about time that we all stood up and went, do you know what, fellas? That just doesn't cut it anymore. I'm not having that. I would. And here's how skewed the whole thing is. There is that thing that a lot of men say before they say something in support of women or in support of feminism. I support them because I have a daughter. I have a wife, or I have a mother, and therefore I support women. You don't need an excuse. just be nicer to people. Be nicer to people, whether they're male, female, brown, green, whatever. It would make life so much easier if you didn't have to pick and choose who you're going to be nice to. If you're just nice to everybody, You don't have to think about it. It's just easier. Um, Ken Asher, I've met some right twats over the years. Oh, haven't we both, Ken? People seem better now, or maybe I just don't care now. There is a degree of that. Yeah, and I think there's also a degree of taking yourself away from potentially toxic people and toxic situations. I think when I know when I was on my upward career path, which plateaued about 30 years ago and has been static ever since. But when I was on the upward path, I would tolerate a whole heap of stuff around me and never say a word. I don't have to worry about that anymore. I'm probably as high as I'm ever going to go. I can't stoop much lower, and therefore I don't have to take crap from anyone. I just press the mute button and move on. Tina Wald, is that banter though? I'm not entirely sure which bit banter was. But even that, for those of you that don't know, and it's, I'm not going to dwell on it because it's not really to do with this. But it was my father's funeral on Friday last week, and I inherited lots of things from my dad, and one of them was just basic respect for women, and despite the fact, my dad was a Bermondsey boy, about that far away from being a true Cockney and all the stuff that goes with it, he could F and blind with the best of them, but not in front of women. It's not a hard skill to learn. And unfortunately, I think, although I'd be the first to admit banter, I quite enjoy it. Particularly at football, to be honest, I'll be the first to admit I enjoy it. But if it's likely to make somebody's life uncomfortable, and isn't it just the thin end of the wedge? If you are allowed to go with banter, what's the next step? There's a fine line between banter and abuse, I guess. I just don't see any reason to tolerate it at all, to be honest. Let's have a look. At Gary Muirhead, we have a woman in Scotland who started her own plant hire company from scratch. Loan and plant hire about 30 or so years ago. Now has 5 depots in the UK and over 500 machines. Well, God bless them. God bless Loman Plant for forging the path. Duncan Riddell has just said evening. He didn't do it with that accent because he's down in the southwest, but you get the idea. He said evening, so evening, Duncan. Gary Muirhead. My other half, let me put my posh head in. My other half asked why she doesn't get wolf whistled on site anymore. Had to look and laugh. Nearly got my nuts cut off. Yeah. Well, do you know the weird thing with that? And I realised that was a bit of a trope within sort of comedy TV shows, and you walk past a building site and you get wolf whistled at. What did the generation that did the wolf whistling actually expect to achieve by that? Did they honestly expect that the attractive woman that walked past or had the misfortune of walking past their building site got wolf whistled and turned around and thought, God, yes, he really is an attractive builder. I'd best go and have a word with him. Did that ever happen? I can't believe it actually did. On that drug statement, I've yet to see many sites do this, though you're told they regularly test, in which last 5 years I've been tested 3 times. Does it make sense? Where I've seen it most is where, obviously, I have a bit of a demolition bias, where demolition brushes up against the rail industry. They're obviously the rail industry and also the petrochemical industry as well. They have very strict rules on all things drink and drugs related. So where you get people working in demolition, but on a trackside or whatever it might be, then the testing is done. But even that, I mentioned the idea of a warning in advance of specific campaigns that are going to be taking place by the HSE. We have exactly the same and completely ridiculous situation in demolition, in which I am aware of teams or gangs of guys and girls being told in advance, you will be undergoing a drug test next Friday. Make sure you're clean, which is fine. It'll get you through the test, but that's not quite the same as saying while you're on site, don't do drugs, because, you know, somebody might die. That's not the same as just getting through a one-day test. It's almost granting permission. Get through the test and then knock yourself out. Do what you like. Mick Norton, I trained many women on a wide range of plant categories, both in military and civic street. I found their enthusiasm, professionalism, and work ethic second to none. Good. I've mentioned this before, and I shall mention it probably until the day I die. You go over to Japan, and you look at the biggest dump trucks, you look at the biggest excavators, and you look at the biggest dozers, and they are largely driven by women, for all of the reasons that Mick Norton has just given there. And certainly one of the demolition sites I went on, biggest excavator on the site, on the site I was on in Japan, driven by a woman who was operating in a pair of slippers and white gloves. Yes, she looked a little bit like Marcel Marceau. That's a whole other story. But her cab was pristine. And I know that's something we've touched upon here in the past. Nigel Williams, HSC should be focusing on the rule book we have and pressing the construction industry's failures rather than looking for more nonsense rules to add to the list. Yeah, I totally agree. And isn't that like the actual police? Isn't that like the legal system? Isn't that like the EU? You know, how about we fix the issues that we've got now rather than looking for new issues to fix? Tina Ward, I just want to be respected and given respect. You have mine. I'd like to think you have everybody's that's here, but thank you for that, Tina. Just like with clothes, the sniff test will tell Ken. Now, what was Ken's last comment? Because I've no idea. There we are. Are 2-day out-of-date eggs okay to use? The sniff test, says Chef Al Grierson from Luxembourg. I'm saying others are putting women on pedestals when the women in question would probably rather just crack on with the graft and prove their worth. Yeah, just allow people to do their job. Turn up at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, crack on, go home when finished time, and just be allowed to do what they like, do what they do. You know, they're employed to do a job. They're employed to dig a hole, take down a building, manage a site, whatever it might be. They don't need the grief. None of us need the grief. You know, I turn up to do the breakfast show. I'm sat here usually about 7 o'clock in the morning, writing the script and everything else, and I genuinely look forward to starting the show and speaking to some of the guys that we've got in the chat and the girls, some of the people that we have in the chat tonight, and others as well. If I thought that every time I turned on my computer I was going to get a whole heap of abuse, and trust me, I've been there. If I thought I was going to get a whole heap of abuse, do you really think I'd bother getting out of bed at 6 o'clock in the morning? I really wouldn't. I remember being the random drink and drug test on house building sites a few years back. When I challenged them, I was told I had to be, as I was the only one they knew who would be clean. That is the worry. That is the worry. I can't remember if it was this evening or earlier today. I know of a demolition company. They're not a London company actually, but they were working in London. Occupational nurse went to the site. 11 guys on site. Random drug test. All 11 failed. On the woke debate, there are just a few in the construction sector who have us all reading The Guardian, enjoying yoga, Radio 4 and eating muesli, but in the real world it's not possible. What's wrong with muesli? I quite like muesli. It's no substitute for a bacon sarnie. I'll be the first to admit that. But okay. Dan Cullen, even new operatives get a lot of hassle on site, which is degrading. I always say, instead of berating or videoing them making mistakes, why not get out and help? Like last year, a guy sat in a machine, videoed a new guy making a mistake, resulting in machine toppling over. Yet to say guy video, sack the new operator, get more training. So help out. We've all been there. Yeah. for those that you don't know, and I'm going to mention it again because I'm really quite proud of this, that is my mug from Nigel Williams, who has the podcast From the Seat of the Cab. And that's one of the things that he talks about. And I wish I had a full list of his episodes in front of me, because I could actually identify the one I was listening to. This tendency to employ somebody, and if they make a single mistake, and I won't use Nigel's precise turn of phrase, but it's get them off my site and get somebody else in, particularly with agency workers. Rather than encouraging or teaching or inspiring, it's just get them off my site. And how do you hope to get further down the line with that? Let's have a look. If woke is designed as alert to racial or social discrimination and injustice, I, for one, am all in favour. Count me in too. If, as surveys suggest, we're an industry where there are 2 suicides every day, then talking openly about how we're feeling should be heralded as an achievement, not derided. Hear, hear, Mr. Norton. Hear, hear. We probably better make the most of Ken Hatcher's company right about now, because he's making an omelette with 2-day-old or 2-day out-of-date eggs. Ken, it's been lovely knowing you. I'll be sure to say nice things about you for your eulogy. I'm sure you'll be fine. I think you find that a lot on sites, unfortunately. Yeah, unfortunately, you're right. Why don't HSE have something to do with mandatory seatbelt warning and not to sit in as many do? Let me try that again. Why don't HSE have something to do with a mandatory seatbelt wearing and not to sit in it as many do? Which I wonder if they wear in a car. Why not a machine? Can they not do something on this, as you get points in car but nothing for plant operators? Over the many years, the eons that I've been working in this industry, one of the things that always amazes me is how the industry moves forward, and some individuals will quickly, almost automatically, find a way, take it back a bit. I remember back in the days when I used to occasionally write about cranes. That's as hard to admit as it is as anything I've ever admitted online, but I used to write about cranes from time to time back in the day. And when we first started to get audible warnings in crane cabs for overreaching or too heavy a load, you would, on a fairly regular basis, find that an operator, the crane operator, had stuffed a rag into the speaker that gave the audible warning so that you didn't have to listen to it. Why am I mentioning this? There is a lot of machines out there now that have a flashing light, a beacon, that says that the seatbelt is on or is not on. And once again, the industry, certain people within the industry have found a way around that, in that they do the seatbelt up, not around themselves, they just do it up and then they sit on it. The ingenuity of this industry, for all the wrong reasons, just never ceases to amaze. It's only banter when both parties are enjoying the crack. When it's one-sided, it's bullying. I would like to get that, probably not tattooed, but I would like to get that on a sign as a constant reminder. That is exactly what it is. Mick Norton's back. The reason for the HSE not holding drugs and alcohol data is because the HSE is the enforcing authority for health and safety and only prosecute under health and safety legislation. Any offence under the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971 would be a matter for the police. Yes, it's absolute madness. Yes. So, in other words, the very people that are going on and off site, the HSE, can't actually do anything about drugs and alcohol, but the people that don't go on site, the police, can. I see a bit of an issue with that, but maybe that's just me. Duncan Riddell, I would rather employ someone who's willing to learn from mistakes they make and listen to those passing down knowledge, rather than employing a bully in the seat who thinks they know best and not willing to learn more. Hear, hear. There is, and I'm sure we've all encountered them, and particularly those that are on site a lot. There is, I'm trying to think of the right word. I've just thought of the right word. There is a breed of operators, and in my experience, they're all men, who are prima donnas. They consider themselves to be God's gift to excavator operating. They've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, have probably got it tattooed on them somewhere to say how great they are at their job. Are they? Are they? Last time I looked, construction and demolition are a team sport. Sport is the wrong word, but you get my idea. It is a team sport. You could be the Cristiano Ronaldo of excavator operating. But if you're doing that in complete isolation from the guy that's driving the dump trucks, or the guy that's driving the dozer, or the wheel loader, or whatever it might be, who cares? Who cares? You are basically sat there twiddling the knobs. That's all you're doing. You're not actually making any real difference to that site or to that company that's employing you and paying you wages. Therapy, Mr. A, you're in good company. Feel free to tell us more about your persuasion for cranes. No. I to be perfectly honest, I just never understood them. I'm smart enough. I'm not that smart, but I'm smart enough to know that they lift stuff up and they put it back down again. I get that, but it was just I could never quite get it. I know it's not just cranes. Piling rigs never really got piling rigs. Whereas, despite the fact that I was a journalist first, construction journalist, and demolition journalist second, I got very quickly excited about plant, dozers, dumpers, whatever it might be. I got excited about that, and yet piling rigs, cranes, and access equipment, not really that bothered. And I just figure there are people out there that do the job better than me. So we've never discussed this, but I will say this on air, and I hope he's still listening. I will leave the cranes to Tristan Mays and cranehub.net so long as he leaves the demolition thing to me. So long as we have a gentleman's agreement on that, we'll be just dandy. Cranehub.net, if you are into cranes, go and take a look. Our friend Tristan does a great job over there. I think that, totally agree, is going back to the comment about it's only banter when both parties are enjoying the crack. When it's one side, it's bullying. I'm going to take a wild stab at that. Telescopic handlers and lorry loaders are two areas in which safe load indicators are regularly interfered with by idiotic operators who fail to realise they are committing a criminal act. Goes back to this business about drugs. If you are, it is a criminal act. I will bow to your superior knowledge of the subject on that, Mick. But who's policing it? If it's a criminal act, I guess that falls under the jurisdiction of the police, the ROSers, as James May will have you call them. Are they likely to pop onto a site and check out how safe load indicators are being interfered with? I'm guessing probably not. When I train the guys, I always keep saying about being a team in demo. That's one of the reasons I love this industry. At its heart, that right there is what makes this industry great. I've had the good fortune of being on a couple of I've been on a lot of sites, and nowhere near as many as most of you guys, but I've been on a lot of sites. And when you see it being done properly, it is a work of art. It is balletic. It really is. I've been on a couple of overnight bridge processions with the fine folks at Armac, for example, where you've got a certain amount of time to get a bridge down before the road is reopened or the railway line is reopened. And it is the ultimate in well-oiled machine. Everybody knows their role. Everybody pulls together. Everybody's going in the same direction. And it is. I mean, you could literally take anybody from any walk of life and say, look at this. You know, the teamwork is it's better than any day trip to the London Stadium to see the mighty West Ham. There are no prima donnas. There are no hissy fits. Everybody pulls together and gets the job done. At its best, Demolition is a work of art, and yeah, it is teamwork. Great way to spend an hour in the evening, mate. I need to cook and not catch you all tomorrow. I need to cook and not old eggs. Yeah, we will see. I will be here tomorrow morning. If Ken Hatcher doesn't turn up tomorrow morning, we'll know the eggs got him. They're usually the ones that won't do anything but operate the machine. Basically not interested in getting the job done. Just being a seat warmer is not enough to be worth a wage. Yeah. There are people that are in it purely, and I guess that's the same in all walks of life. People are in it for themselves. There's no I in team. No, there is not. And Nigel Williams, I was having a chuckle the other day when I was told about an amazing machine driver I watched. He wasn't at all, but he thought he was God's gift to an excavator. Sadly, he is deluded, harmless, but deluded. Yeah. And you know, one of the things, listen, I am an observer. I am an audience member when it comes to operating machines. I operate machines rarely and badly. One tends to lead to the other. But I do know a good operator when I see one. And one of the things that really makes it stand out for me is I can only liken it to watching somebody like, for those of you that like their football, Zinedine Zidane. Zinedine Zidane, probably the greatest footballer I've ever seen. Did everything at his own pace. He kind of walked around a football pitch and seemed to take an age to find the right pass and to take the right shot. He seemed to take an age, and the best operators I've ever seen kind of replicate that. It's not whiz bang. It's not look at me, look how fast I am, look how much material I can throw from the bucket into the back of that dump truck and make the dump truck driver's life difficult. It's not about that. It's smooth, it's precise, it's careful, it's considered, and it's safe. And they stand out like the bulls on a bulldog, as the expression goes. You can spot them a mile off. And I'm never, ever, ever drawn to, as our friend Nigel has just said there, God's gifts. You know, those that are showing off, they don't do it for me. What about George Best? Yeah, what about George Best? George Best was fine, but George Best was never, ever Bobby Moore. And I will leave you with that thought. I don't know whether to take this personally or not. Some people's ambition are above their ability. Hey, you're looking at it right here. Right, enough, people. It's nearly an hour and a half of your evening gone. I have not eaten dinner yet, and I've got to get a show together for tomorrow, so I'm going to love you and leave you. It's been a joy, as it always is. I really appreciate you all being here. Thank you very much indeed for our regular stages. Thank you also to our newcomers, Duncan Riddell, and to Tina Ward. Really appreciate your input. And I'm not going to leave you with anything inspirational at all, because that's not really what I do. But I am going to try and find there you are. There's a little rule to live by to make your life a little bit better. It's only banter when both parties are enjoying the crack. When it's one-sided, it's bullying. So if you were planning to turn up for tomorrow's show at 10 a.m. to call me names, that's not right. And I won't have it. Try doing my job. You have to turn up and hit the ground running, all kinds of plant, diggers, dozers, shovels, etc. Good crack, but hard going. And McNaughton, many years ago, I once watched an old Irish 64RB dragline operator retrieve a football that had been kicked at the River Ouse near York. It was, without a doubt, poetry in motion. Yeah, funnily enough, when I was up in Eskilstuna, thank you very much indeed. I thought it would make a change from the old faithful that's usually sat on my My noggin. Oh, incidentally, I can't remember which episode it was. I was listening to From the Seat of the Cab this afternoon, one of the episodes that Nigel Williams has done, and he used the expression, "It gets your noggin jogging." I'm stealing that. I did like that. Thank you very much indeed for that, Jim. Cheers, Mark. Been good crack. Yeah, I just want to go back to this one very quickly, and then I'm going to call it a day. I was up in Eskilstuna with the fine folks at Volvo a couple of months back, and they were getting ready for some Volvo days, so they were going to get some customers along to see the new equipment and to operate the new equipment and what have you. And they had an operator test set up. Imagine a frame with lots of holes in it, and in the holes there were bits of wood, and on an excavator there was a little bit of plastic sort of poking out off the bucket, and you had to push out these bits of wood, and it was against the clock to see who could get rid of all the wood the quickest. Now, bearing in mind, most of the people that were in attendance were actually influencers, content creators, mugs like this guy. There was some furious activity, and somebody got 12, somebody got 15 bits of the wood out, and then one of the guys who is an operator first and a content creator second got behind the wheel of the machine, and I think he did 36. And where all of us were like this, he was poke. Poetry in motion, as our friend says. Right. Good night, all. Thank you very much indeed for that, Ken. Enjoy your eggs. Many thanks indeed for that, Mick. Thank you for being here. I'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. For the Breakfast Show. I'll be tired. I'll be wearing a different hat, but apart from that, it'll all be pretty much the same. Thank you for being here, everyone. Really appreciate all your input. Enjoy your evening. I'll see you tomorrow. All the best.